there's a
No
lot of
problem.
artifacts and something that has to do, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it's something to do with this queen and what the queen's was involved with back in the times of Mesopotamia and even before that, as far as technology that was shared or at least known of by this civilization that was being held there. So it's a complicated situation because obviously the reason for them going after Yemen is, again, a multitude of reasons, just more geographical gain, more compliance by for the American people. Also, how convenient that happens now, right during the midterm elections, where when President Bush was at an all-time low for approval, then suddenly 9/11 happens, and next thing you know, people that never waved a flag before up the next day waving the flag saying, "Go kill the Al-Qaeda and save us." And now, with Obama having such horrible ratings and so many people being unhappy, now this happens. So what's the smart thing to do for them? Make up another war. Make it scary in this country so that President Obama can save the day.
Yeah, it seems to be a reoccurring pattern. It's happens again and again and again. Do you think there's any, there's the BP disaster and things like that? Do you think there's any connection with? Some people are saying there's some kind of a Stargate there as well, and they may have done that for some ulterior motive.
My opinion on what happened with the Gulf oil disaster was that it was absolutely a false flag operation. The problem with that false flag operation is that initially it got out of control. It got out of their hands. They were not able to keep it under the control that they wanted it to. I strongly believe from everything that I've looked at, the documents I found, and all the extensive research I did, I poured a lot of time into that one, is that was, see, a false flag operation, depending on the size of it, sometimes will be planned years ahead. This one does not appear, from everything I've seen, was not planned years ahead. Now, of course, some people say, well, what about that Illuminati deck of cards? And they say there was a card in there that was the BP disaster. And, of course, a lot of other people say that this is going with the Book of Revelations, where the sea turns to blood and it turns black and all that. But we have to look at one important thing. What Goldman Sachs did prior to the unusual impromptu visit of Bureau of Land Management agents, the unusual delay between the first explosion when the Coast Guard was notified, the shuffling of stocks and investments BP did the day before, and, of course, the emergency meeting that happened in D.C. that was called by whomever for the Obama administration, where they were worried about uprising and an awakening that has been happening in the United States as far as a threat. And then, of course, implementing basically martial law with the United States Coast Guard, where a branch of the U.S. military was acting as private security for a company that's not even owned by this country. So many things people need to look at that it's for me, it's plain. It's plain as daylight. And I believe that was done because this emergency meeting that happened on March 31st, and then on April 20th, the disaster happens. And to get back what you were saying, the Caribbean has a lot of activity. And when I mean activity, I mean UFO and non-UFO activity. There are around 12 underwater installations in the area of the Caribbean. Remember, I said only 3 were owned by the U.S., while the other 9 aren't even manned by humans. They have been monitored, obviously, but from what I know, and this is through, again, some valuable contacts I have and even going back and tracking down some people I worked with, they are installations by off-world beings that, from everything I've been able to figure out, don't want to have anything to do with humans at this point. So there is the theory, too, that perhaps that was some kind of biological warfare attack on them. I highly doubt that as well. But, this is the problem with this is one of the, I don't want to say it's a problem with the Internet, but, things can get carried away with the Internet, and I try to be very careful with what information comes across my desk.
Well, I'm sure they're pretty upset about what happened to their ocean, to having a underwater base and seeing it, looking out their windows and seeing it covered with oil, I guess would definitely be a little bit of a slap in the face to them.
Absolutely, and it certainly would be definitely a slap in the face. But it seems to me that, say, with a false flag operation, like I said, there's always the outlook for an outcome, and the outcome kind of spiderwebs out with what happened with BP. Even one thing that I don't know how many people are aware of this, but the Mineral Management Service, the MMS, actually is dividing into 3 organizations. One's still going to be the MMS, and another one is going to be a law enforcement regulation department that does nothing but security for offshore oil rigs in U.S. territorial waters and beyond. The other one, I haven't been able to find out what it is yet. The Freedom of Information Act sometimes can be a joke, because I did contact the Mineral Management Service and have yet to get a response from them on any of that information, which frankly I'm not surprised, but that's not going to stop me from digging.
Yeah, I've got one of the people I know want to really know the different types of ET beings that you've experienced or worked with, or even some of them that you've heard about, where you have some pretty good reputable people talking about their experiences.
Okay, well, there was obviously one where the grays, or one species of the grays, I should say, because there's quite a few. I can't even begin to tell you which one they were, but they were present on some of the operations I did, not out in plain open, but with some, and I just want to say some because there's only a few that I remember, but with some of the military abductions I did were actually known as co-ops, and that was where humans were being abducted and handed over to the Greys for whatever reason, experimentation. Some people say that it's for, well, what I do know is that this specific species of Greys, they cannot reproduce anymore. So what they do is they are cloning themselves, and they use human DNA for that, because human DNA is actually quite universal for a lot of applications. The other ones that we're dealing with are known as Alpha Draconians. They were definitely involved in some aspects of certain places that I was at, such as Panama, Costa Rica, Paraguay, a lot of the operations I was doing in South America. There were a few other off-planet beings that were in a certain zone that was a restricted zone. It was a red zone at Pro-C, where very few people had access to. I know that I had access around it, but as far as I remember, I didn't have access into the place. There were various beings there. Why they were there, I couldn't even begin to tell you, but I can tell you, because I know the most about this one just because of my experience with them, are known as the Arcturians, which had nothing to do with Project Seagate. They aren't very amused with that, and they have been making more and more contact globally with people, doing what they can, not helping, not being shepherds, but more, you could say, well, guides. They're being guides to people for a lot of reasons, raising your frequency. They have a very strong I don't want to say that we are like pets to them, but they're very advanced and they are sitting, waiting for us to do what we need to do and stop this. They're very empathetic and they are tired of watching us destroy ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the ones that were directly involved, and I call it the intervention, but the intervention that happened with me, which was the reason of what took place in June of 2005, which caused me to have a complete wipeout of memory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you describe these beings?
Well, I can describe them in two ways. And I'll describe them in the three ways that I have had my encounters with them. Okay. When I first initially was having encounters with them, they have to be very careful. Most people are at a certain frequency that's much lower than what they're at. And they're at a density and a frequency that is very, very high. But what they are able to do is bring their frequency down to more fifth, fourth, third density levels. So what it's done is called the acclimation period, where they come and they're more in this light type of vessel. They look like a ball of light is the only way I can really describe it. And I would just be with them. And this is where I had a lot of effects that happened where later down the road I had to say, we need to do something about this, because I would literally sometimes wake up in cold sweats, dehydration, even coughing up some blood, because my body was having such an adverse effect to them just simply being near me. And they didn't understand that. They call it the skin suit. They wear skin suits. They haven't had that. They can make themselves appear solid, and they can even condense their energy so that you can touch them. Mm-hmm. So this was my first interaction. But when you see them in their form, they can change. They can be anywhere from 3 feet tall to 7 feet tall. Very light looking. They have eyes, they have fingers, they have toes, but they don't wear clothes. For those listeners out there that ever saw the movie Cocoon with the life forms that were all light, that's the best way I can describe it. Yeah. However, when I had my intervention of when I was trying to self-terminate, which is a program that was put in me, I had a very interesting experience at an emergency room hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a bit of a long story, but I'll just be brief. I was at a point where I had it with my life. I was off the grid. I thought I was just crazy, and I was in hiding. No one knew where I was at. Excuse me. And I had collected through here and there when I was couch surfing or living out in the desert a bunch of pills. And long story short, I swallowed enough pills that it should have killed a compound of people. Yet at this emergency room, they said this tall, pale, quiet man came in carrying me with all the stuff that I had and told the nurses that showed up every single toxin that was in my body. And then they put me on the stretcher, the gurney, as they said. When they turned around, this gentleman was gone. As if he had just vanished. And I didn't really think about that experience for well over a year or two after that, until some other things were brought forth to my attention by them, who I refer to as my friends, realizing that was someone who I now call Myris, who's become a friend. And he is my, I don't want to say guide, because they give me some very interesting information that sometimes it takes me a lot of time to decipher. It almost comes in code. He's almost like an advisor. He looks over, he'll feed me some information, but he certainly doesn't hold my hand.
Yeah. Now, these guys, a lot of people say they're responsible for the crop circles and a lot of very benevolent contacts going on.
Absolutely benevolent contacts. As far as the crop circles, I've never asked, but it wouldn't surprise me. Again, there's another subject that's got so many theories, and really a lot of the theories I do believe are true. There are people out there that will say that humans were only created by one